Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am Johannes Oluwatobi Wojuola, and I am representing Mr. Mohammed Nami, the outgoing Executive Chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. I will be reading his speech as given to me. The keynote address delivered by Mr. Mohammed Nami, the former Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, at the Boy Child Summit 2023, hosted by the Women Community in Africa on Thursday, 19th October 2023. Protocols. The Executive Secretary, National Human Rights Commission, Chief Anthony Okechukwu Ojukwu SAN, Ambassador Humphrey, the High Commissioner of Namibia to Nigeria, our royal fathers present, His Excellency Alhaji Yusuf Nuhu, the Etu Agai, His Excellency Alhaji Ahmad Ado Bayero Dan Iyankanu, the Chairman of the WCA, Prince Kasumu Ademola, members of security agencies here present, speakers, special guests on the high table, our host, Hajia Khadija Abdullahi Iya, and most importantly, the boys and girls here present. It is with great delight to be here. It is a great delight to be here today to serve as the keynote speaker at the Women Community in Africa's Boy Child Summit 2023. I want to thank my sister Hajia Khadija Abdullahi Iya and everyone behind the Beyond Mentors Community Initiative and its advocacy branch, the Women Community in Africa, who have put up this timely summit on the boy child. The work over the years may seem a little when compared to the vast deficits that need to be cured. But I must say that it has changed lives in tremendous ways that you may not be able to account for. Imagine the domino effect. The impact for every young person that has found their way to your meetings and town halls. Imagine the change in orientation and how that single change affects the little community around that person, and on and on. Before going into the meat of my short remark, let me pause to say thank you for all that you have done. This is a good point to request our audience to give a round of applause to the Beyond Mentors Community Initiative. The theme of this summit, Re-engineering Boys to Value, has become an imperative subject for conversation in a world that is currently suffering a deficiency in moral values from honesty, respect, hard work, trustworthiness, compassion, courage, self-control, politeness, generosity, fairness, equality, gratitude, tolerance, loyalty, honor, and so many other values are in steep decline in the currency of today's social transactions. What is worse, those who should know better by leading in both affirming and entrenching these timeless values have fallen guilty of either laxity or being bad examples. The result today is a social imbalance that has bettered a society riddled with ills and moral decay. The attendant outcome is there for all of us to see. Cultism, brazen corruption, fractured families and relationships, unhealthy rivalry, disunity, and many other ills. The underlying cause of all this is that we have not armed our young people with the proper character and values to both challenge the ills as well as serve as a counter to those whose minds have been poisoned with negative values. The family, both extended and neutral, being the first unit of social interaction that any individual has with society, plays a most crucial role in all this. It is at the home that a child is made or marred. It is at the home that a child is expected to first pick up the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. It is at the home that a child is first armed with the tools to engage with society, from how to greet, to courtesy, to hard work, and so on. It has thus become imperative for us to identify some of the gaps that have occurred in the upbringing of children that has led us to the pitfalls we have experienced in our society today. When children do not get the right care, the proper treatment, and the essential training, they become a threat to our social engineering. One of the gaps in the upbringing of children is none other than the topic I have been asked to speak on today. Quote, boy-child abuse and social behavior, with more particular focus on the subject of boy-child abuse. The Cambridge Dictionary defines child abuse as behavior in which adults intentionally treat children in a cruel or violent way. This, for me, does not provide an adequate scope of what the issue truly is. For me, child abuse is any form of mistreatment of a child by a parent, guardian, or other adult responsible for his or her welfare. Some commentators have gone further to expand the scope of this to include any form of threat to the child's well-being, including neglect. 5 forms of abuse have been identified by subject matter experts on this. They include physical abuse, which includes all forms of physical violence, emotional or psychological abuse, which is where an adult regularly berates a child, acts in a dismissive and hostile manner towards the child, or intentionally scares the child. There's also physical neglect, which is a situation where the child does not receive the care and nurturing that he or she needs. There's also emotional or psychological neglect, which is the continuous lack of positive attention for the child, ignoring the child's need for love, warmth, and security. This category also covers cases in which children are witnesses to violence between their parents or caregivers. Last, but certainly not the least, is sexual abuse, which is sexual contact which an adult forces upon a child. The abuse of the boy child is as rampant as it is unspoken of. The general notion seems to place the male to be above board of being abused. So, it often falls on deaf ears, in fact, disappointing ones, when cases of boy-child abuse are reported. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the renowned Nigerian author and social advocate, in a widely viewed speech made at the TEDx Houston, titled, "We Should All Be Feminists," made a striking comment on the case of the boy child that has made his abuse a third-rate issue. Permit me to quote her. "We do a great disservice to boys in how we raise them. We stifle the humanity of boys. We define masculinity in a very narrow way. Masculinity becomes this hard, small cage, and we put boys inside this cage. We teach boys to be afraid of fear, of weakness, of vulnerability. We teach them to mask their true selves because they have to be, in Nigerian speak, a hard man. An ungodly amount of abuse of young boys occurred today and has been swept under the carpet on the altar of building resilient, tough, silent, and hard guys. This has led us to build socially unprepared young men that have made the ills mentioned earlier on all too often an occurrence in our society. The World Health Organization notes that 1 in 13 men report having been abused as a child from the ages 0 to 17 years. I beg to add to this statistic by saying that this is in fact those who are bold enough to report that indeed this occurred while they were children. I dare say that many others, even as high as 1 in 3 men, especially in our African society, have faced one form of abuse or the other from the ages of 0 to 17. I listened attentively to the presentation by my young friends on the topic, abuse has no gender. Let us take care of the boys. Indeed, over time, the spotlight on matters of child abuse have all too often been beamed on only the girl child, while inadvertently neglecting the social needs and growth of the boy child. And this is another form of abuse, in fact. Our culture has further reinforced this neglect. The male child is left to self-develop, to define his future, and deal with his burdens himself, and ultimately to hide his feelings, like in the words of Mrs. Ngozi Adichie, to mask their true selves. In the course of preparing for this address, I stumbled on several stories of victims of boy-child abuse. One recurring pattern in these stories is the fact that the abusers were always close to them, either through filial relations, family friends, or neighbors in their immediate community. The Punch newspaper, in a report dated 28 May 2002 or 2022, titled "Men Sexually Abused at Childhood Narrate Ugly Encounters Psychological Trauma," shares the provocative and sad experiences of some young men in Nigeria who went through ugly and horrific sexual abuses as teenagers. Permit me, if time allows, to lift the story of Mr. Olanrewaju Tobiloba, who told the story of his defilement by 2 female neighbors as a 16-year-old. He said, and I quote, "We lived in a face me, I face you apartment at the time. I just returned from school, and it was a common thing for me and our neighbors to play together. Sometimes they came over to our apartment, and we went to theirs. That day, I went to their room, and we were playing. At one point, I lay on their bed, and one of them lay beside me. Suddenly, one of them started rubbing my chest and jumped on me. The one who was sexually abusing me was in her 30s at the time, while the other one was 28. I was naive to think that it was still our regular playful act, not knowing that they had other plans for me. Whilst trying to struggle and get her to disembark from the bed, the other sister came and started rubbing my legs. She removed my trousers and fondled my manhood. They told me that they were playing with me and offered me a malt drink and poured milk into it. They took it too, so I didn't know what they had in mind. They told me they were playing with me. I took the mixture, not knowing that they had mixed something with it. After some time, I realized that I had become weak to resist anything. They had their way. I was defiled that day at least When I came to full knowledge of myself, that was what I noticed. After that occurrence, I could not tell my mom. I was afraid because I felt she would make it public, as she always worried about me. I kept the issue to myself. I didn't want to be a subject of ridicule. I kept the sisters at arm's length and restricted myself from their room and tried not to make them come to ours whenever my mother was not around. They asked me if I told my mom what happened among us and that they wanted me to tell her. I knew that they were aware of the disciplinarian my mom is, but was making a mockery of me. They told me that we will still engage in the act. I was scared each time they said so, but helpless and tried to avoid them. The abuse started between 2015 and 2016. It stopped after the third time. I took steps not to allow them violate me sexually again. I intentionally stayed back at school till 7 p.m. just to avoid them. I only returned home when I was sure that my mom would have either returned home or close to the house from her workplace. Mr. Olanrewaju told the Punch newspaper how he never told anyone about this till many years later, and how this affected his social behavior towards the other sex. His story is one of many. In fact, one of the few that will ever be bold to speak out. To tackle this hidden menace, one of the crucial things we must do is to create more awareness and advocacy on the truths around child abuse. We must also start by accepting the reality that abuse is endemic in our society. And we must end the culture of turning a blind eye to its existence. We must begin to groom the next generation of boys that will become men by empowering them with the right tools against abuse. We must provide avenues for young men to have safe spaces to speak and share their experiences and how they feel. And these safe spaces must begin in our homes. To the boys here present, my advice is to you is to be bold and speak out. Our law enforcement agencies must also begin to see the boy-child abuse as a scourge, just as vile as other criminalities that more often than not are only the symptoms of the consequences of neglecting our young men. They must be well informed of these realities happening at our backyards and deal with them in accordance with the law. Advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. Conversations on boy-child abuse must be had. It is not to be shunned to the backseat or kept as a taboo in our social discourse. I must commend again the Beyond Mentors Community Care Initiative for its effort in this regard. You're doing a great job. Please keep it up. As I close, one way we can nip the issue of boy-child abuse in the bud is through good boy-child mentorship. Older men must begin to step into the shoes of being worthy mentors to the young boys around them. We must not just be heard speaking to these boys, but be seen showing good examples of character and moral uprightness around them, especially as fathers, as brothers, as uncles, and as older friends. A popular saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first right step. I want to say that this conversation here today is one right step in this journey to eradicating boy-child abuse in our society. I look forward to an enriching conversation around the theme of this summit. Most of all, I look forward to seeing the handful of young boys here becoming transformed by the conversations we would have. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.